For the past 6 months, a controversy has emerged within gamer culture that has culminated in a rift between gamers, journalists, and feminists alike. It's time to address it on today's trigger warning. On August 16, 2014, Aaron Joney published a tell-all expose of his experiences while dating game developer Zoe Quinn. He alleged that during the relationship she had sexual relations with up to 5 other men. While this might have been quickly forgotten and put off to the side, those who read the so-called Zoe post noticed something that led them to a greater discussion. And that was that one of her illicit relationships was with games journalist Nathan Grayson of Kotaku, formerly of Rock Paper Shotgun. In 2 of his articles, he offered favorable coverage of Zoe Quinn. One, outlining her experiences with the Pepsi Game Jam, and the other drawing attention to her interactive fiction project being greenlit on Steam, specifically making mention of her project over 50 others that had been greenlit around the same time. As such, both Grayson and Quinn received measurable criticism, particularly Grayson. Not for writing about Quinn, but moreover from failing to acknowledge that, whether sexual or not, he shared a personal relationship with the developer. In what was originally coined as the Quinspiracy, gamers concerned about the lack of disclosure on the behalf of Grayson took to social media to discuss the issue. While it's true that both of them received criticism, and in a few select cases outright harassment, the discussion was mainly about the ethical dilemmas that the Quinspiracy revealed. A popular YouTube commentator, Mundane Matt, made a video discussing the Zoe post. Less than a day after going up, the video was flagged under a DMCA claim by a person claiming to be Zoe Quinn. Whether Quinn herself did it or it was an anonymous troll claiming to be Quinn, it was clear that the DMCA was false and that Mundane Matt had offered his commentary strictly under fair use provisions of the DMCA. But unfortunately, the DMCA claim culminated in the Streisand effect taking over and drawing even more attention, particularly from those who take issue with censorship. The story of the Zoe post and Mundane Matt's DMCA claim spread like wildfire. In the days following, Quinn's Tumblr blog was allegedly hacked by third parties and her personal information revealed. And later, the website of an unrelated game developer known for his toxic personality, Phil Fish, creator of the indie game Fez, was hacked and Fish doxed as well. To compound the matter, a post on Reddit's gaming subreddit discussing the issue was suddenly and inexplicably scrubbed clean, resulting in over 20,000 comments deleted and numerous shadow bans given out. Like the false DMCA against Mundane Matt, this action was viewed as censorship, and once again the Streisand effect took over, causing the issue to spread even further. Another popular YouTube commentator, Internet Aristocrat, produced a number of videos dubbed The Quinspiracy soon afterwards. This was an example of what could have been a simply addressed internet drama exploding into something far bigger than it should have, and one that had the unintended side effect of drawing attention to the issues surrounding censorship when it applies to games journalism. By August 28th, Internet Aristocrat's video had been retweeted by actor Adam Baldwin, famous for his work in the film Full Metal Jacket and the TV series Firefly, Chuck, and more recently TNT's The Last Ship. With the tweet, he coined the hashtag Gamergate. Even by this point, it could have died out and fell by the wayside, as many, even those who supported the hashtag, believed would be the case. But then came the infamous Gamers Are Dead articles. A series of 10 to 12 articles that were released through numerous gaming journalism sites on the very same day, hours and in some cases minutes apart from one another. While this may seem innocuous to some, it's undeniable that the articles were coordinated from behind the scenes, intent on painting modern gaming culture as a white male refuge and referring to gamers, among other things, as obtuse shit-slingers. To those who had contended from the beginning that there might be an issue of collusion and cronyism within the sphere of games journalism, it was clear proof that they were on the right track. Almost from the beginning, it was suggested that those who were attempting to discuss either the Quinspiracy or Gamergate and the nuances within were explicitly against the mere existence of female game developers, or were more specifically anti-feminist entities. While it's undeniable that there exist anti-feminist views on the side of Gamergate, They're largely the exception and not the rule. And it's my belief that it evolved naturally as a consequence of numerous extremist feminists coming out and lambasting the hashtag and those associated with it. But the origins were not about harassing a woman involved in gaming. They were about criticizing the behavior of a woman, yes, but only in the context of what was perceived by many to be emotionally abusive behavior on her behalf. The main focus for many was not Quinn, but about Grayson's lack of disclosure and his personal relationship with the subject that he wrote about. I myself can be quoted in the early days on Twitter saying that it's not about Quinn, it's about Grayson. But it was in the vast majority of cases about discussing the events and what the events had revealed about the state of games journalism. Over time, even more examples of cronyism and collusion were revealed, justifying the concerns of Gamergate supporters. So it wasn't much of a surprise when the exact games journalists that were receiving criticism for collusion, cronyism, and alleged corruption dismissed said concerns and instead told the very people asking questions about the state of games journalism that they were a hate movement that was primarily and specifically attacking women in the industry. The truth is that yes, there are numerous incidents of note that involved harassment of women either involved in indie gaming or speaking about games that did indeed receive some rather concerning threats. But the majority of these threats made no mention of Gamergate. And thus, it could only be loosely implied that Gamergate supporters were the ones behind said threats. In the case of Anita Sarkeesian, she had never been a topic brought up about the journalism controversy until she asserted that it was, in fact, about male gamers attempting to edge women out of gaming. Despite having no proof of her claim, she was emphatically believed and supported by the very games journalists that were being criticized. Not long after Sarkeesian's statement, she received and publicized violent threats toward her, followed quickly by a plea for donations. She received $400,000 in the 3 months following said threats, went on a media tour, and even appeared as a guest on the Colbert Report. I'm not going to attempt to allege the threats were fake because the truth is that I have no proof of that either way. But it can't be denied that her charity organization profited immensely from the controversy. Since then, she and her producer, Jonathan McIntosh, have regularly criticized and condemned Gamergate as an anti-feminist and, more importantly, misogynist movement, despite the vast majority of resources among Gamergate supporters specifically addressing issues of collusion and cronyism. Not long after Sarkeesian received her threats, another female game developer who self-admitted that she was poking the bear by using extremely hyperbolic and offensive language, as well as creating fake accounts pretending to be a rape-happy, woman-hating male gamer, publicized her own death threats. Brianna Wu, prior to this event, was an unknown. Most gamers never heard of her or her project, Revolution 60, until after the threats were publicized. Again, the threats made no mention of Gamergate or why exactly she was being given death and rape threats. But Wu asserted that it was Gamergate supporters who had sent it. Again, she did receive threats, and without proof, I'm not going to suggest that they were faked, but in the same vein, she had no proof that it was a Gamergate supporter who sent them. It's the contention of many that, if legitimate, the threats were the work of a third-party troll. Since then, Wu has continuously made remarks that are both offensive and hyperbolic, which has antagonized many within Gamergate who have been attempting to keep the discussion away from feminism and purely on issues of journalism. In some cases, even outright calling upon the Obama administration to break international law to bring a man who has committed no crimes to justice, and regularly referring to herself as the best-known feminist in the tech field, and continuously asserting her martyrdom. And so, it's my contention that while there does exist a large anti-feminist contingent within Gamergate, it's largely because A, the hyperbole and rhetoric of Gamergate's opponents in journalist and feminist spheres has antagonized and attracted an anti-feminist element, and B, it has caused those who were previously neutral about feminism to become disdainful about it. There's only so much someone can be called names before they rebel against it. It's also my personal belief that many of the feminists standing in opposition to Gamergate were misled and are being used as tools by the very journalists that Gamergate seeks to hold to task. Ask anyone in Gamergate, and they'll be the first ones to say that Gamergate is first and foremost about ethics in games journalism, and is merely tangentially about feminism or the discussion over women in games, largely as a result of the manipulation that I just mentioned. But the facts as they are undeniable. Gamergate was right about the issue of journalistic ethics from the start. This was proven as far back as September when Breitbart journalist Milo Yiannopoulos revealed the existence of Game Journo Pros, a secret mailing list inspired by Ezra Klein's controversial Journalist, another secret mailing list comprised of left-leaning journalists that was shut down not long after its existence was exposed. And its users were alleged to have been colluding to prop up then-presidential candidate Barack Obama. Game Journo Pros revealed that there was quite a bit in the way of collusion among many journalists within gaming media, and definitively proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the concerns of gamers were not unfounded. The mailing list eventually shut down after it had been revealed to the public. It's important to note that not all the members of the mailing list agreed with what was going on within it, and that's actually what culminated in its existence being leaked. Additionally, since the question of ethics were brought up by Gamergate, several gaming news sites, one after the other, began to both update and publish detailed ethical policies. Even those who were directly opposed to Gamergate, framing it strictly as a misogynist hate movement. If that was truly the case, one would think that they would merely laugh off accusations of corruption and cronyism. But no. One after the other, like a domino effect, they updated their policies and made it more accessible. Even sites that remained neutral on the topic updated their policies. Sites that were either pro or sympathetic to Gamergate made their ethical policies loud and clear. To many, this legitimized the movement. However, many of these sites still stood in opposition to Gamergate, framing them, once again, as a hate movement, despite the fact that Gamergate had, in effect, created a much more transparent gaming media industry, which is inarguably a positive thing. Throughout the entire debacle, numerous individuals, whether intentional or not, became well-known names in the discussion on both sides. Some have monopolized on their involvement, while others merely hold firm to their views due to a sense of inner ethics. And this is true for both sides. For example, gaming critic and online personality John Bain, also known as Total Biscuit, has held firm to his sense of ethics at no personal gain to himself, while the same can be said for former NFL player Chris Kluwe. While the two cannot be accurately compared, as Bain tends to be very logical and addresses the complexities of the issue, and Kluwe tends to go on the offensive against particular personalities on the pro-Gamergate side, they both come from a position of personal ethics. Conversely, other e-celebs are clearly toxic and, in my opinion, monopolize and make gains based on their involvement in the discussion, such as the aforementioned Brianna Wu on the anti-Gamergate side, and the controversial red pillar Roosh V on the pro-Gamergate side. Other more anonymous voices have used Gamergate and the surrounding controversies to get their jollies by acting as agent provocateurs and sending anonymous threats and harassment in order to get the two sides fighting more often. In my opinion, to exert a sense of self-importance and relevance. But the reality is that anonymous trolls are just that. Trolls, and of no great importance. The effect they have, however, is often the effect they intended to achieve, for better or for worse. And it's the masses on both sides of the argument that feed their egos. In my opinion, such behavior is better off ignored, and the people on both sides should withhold their sympathy for e-celebs and victims of third-party trolls alike, for the sole purpose to demoralize the trolls, if nothing else. However, the reality is that both sides of the discussion have rational people, and both sides have vitriolic shit disturbers. Gamergate has become a cultural phenomenon surrounding video games and the issues therein. It has spawned numerous forms of media, both positive and negative, to the gaming community as a whole, such as the much maligned Law & Order Special Victims Unit episode that painted gamers in much the same fashion as Reefer Madness painted cannabis users. However, it has now come to a point where big-name developers such as Mark Kern have spoken out, calling the games media to task for creating this problem. And I'm inclined to agree with them. Gaming culture is no different than any other culture in that regard. We are full of all sorts of people from every walk of life imaginable, On both sides of the Gamergate coin, we are chock full of people with both positive and negative views of the world at large. Both sides are full of rational people, and we share radical extremists. But each side tends to look at the other as though the extremists represent the whole. I've been an ardent supporter of Gamergate since the day I first heard the name Nathan Grayson. But hating anti-Gamergate individuals was never an option for me. The idea of hating them never crossed my mind. Disdain? Yes, occasionally, specifically for those who I suspect are using the controversy for personal gain, or who utilize hyperbole and rhetoric that fails to address the nuance of the conversation. But it cannot be denied that the paradigm is starting to shift. Recently, I've been having more and more rational conversations with anti-Gamergate individuals. I don't intend to change their minds. That's not my goal. My goal is to merely explain to them why I hold my views on the topic. Now, I've been known to roll my eyes or express frustration at them, but my goal is first and foremost to foster a sense of understanding between both sides, many of whom might be surprised as to just how aligned their political views actually are, despite being on opposing sides of this particular argument. The reality is that the contents of this video barely scratch the surface of the mountains of nuance, hit pieces, interviews, rhetoric, proof, and legitimacy of Gamergate, to the point where it's becoming difficult to clearly define no matter what the opinion is that you hold. This is a controversy that has garnered the attention of upwards of 100,000 people on either side of the discussion. When you involve so many people, you'll get a different answer every time you ask the question, what is Gamergate? But it's not going to end. Gamergate can't be stopped at this point. It has long since reached critical mass and will likely continue to grow the more people become aware of the issues. But moreover, there's always going to be more work to do. Even should the gaming media hold itself to task and adhere to its own transparency standards, Gamergate will still remain as a watchdog against the excesses of games journalism. That includes the responsible adults in its midst with opinions on all sides, and that includes the extremists as they exist everywhere. It's now a mainstay in video game culture, and the argument's not going to end anytime soon so long as there exist people with opinions on either side. But any harm instituted by either side of the argument can be mitigated so long as we all remain clear-headed, open-minded, and willing to discuss the issues rationally, without prejudice, and in good faith. Anyways, I'd like to thank you for sticking around. It's probably the longest episode of Trigger Warning yet. There are several things that I neglected to mention in this episode, and that's largely because I lack time, or I believe that they had little bearing on the points that I wanted to raise. Keep in mind that I attempted to remain as objective as possible, but the fact remains that I do support the argument of ethics in journalism, and tend to dismiss concerns of Gamergate supporters attempting to push women out of video game culture as basic fear-mongering for manipulation or attention. Still, nothing that I've posited as opinion is 100% definitive, and there's always room for nuance in this discussion. So whether you're pro or anti, remember that the person on the other end of the computer screen has reasons for holding their views. And remember that the person on the other end of the screen is also flesh, blood, and emotions, just like yourself. I don't expect peace from both sides, but I don't respect vitriol or hate from either. With that said, thanks for watching, and if you like this episode, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, comment, and show me some click love on that like button below, and I'll catch you next time.